Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today is Friday once again. It is time for Friday Reads, and it is May 19th, so we are getting into the final third of this month already. Can you believe it? All right, well, last week, let's see, where did I leave off? We are still watching The Wire. We have now entered into season 5, the last season. Season 4 was definitely, it was really good. It is the most depressing, I think, of all the seasons because it deals with a group of young boys that are eighth graders and involved in the drug selling stuff. And coming out of this, watching it again on the other side of my teaching career and having worked with kids for years and being a parent, I don't know, it's heavy. It's also hard to watch this show just every night, back to back to back. It's probably the best TV series, in my opinion, of all time. And I'm not counting shows that are only like one show that's 10 episodes or something, but multi-season shows. But we're not even really binge watchers. We watch 2 episodes a night, and not even back to back. We'll watch one and then we'll split off and go read and stuff, and then we'll come back around and watch another one. But it's still, once this one ends, we're gonna pick something more escapist. We're thinking maybe Silo, which is based on some books that we both read. But I'll talk about that when we get to it. Okay, let's focus on books. Isn't this channel about books? What was I reading this week? Well, whilst we left off, I was reading Mr. Flood's Last Resort, and I talked about it quite a bit last week. I was very enthusiastic, and I remained enthusiastic. It's really a good book. I read 2 books by Jess Kidd. This was her second book, but the first book I read by her was The Night Ship, which is her most recent book, her 4th book. And I did definitely see a progression in her writing skills between these 2 books. I'll talk about it in a second. To refresh your memory, or in case you have newly joined me, and welcome if you did, this is a story about Maud, who is a caregiver to the elderly, and she receives an assignment at Mr. Flood's house. Mr. Flood lives in a dilapidated Victorian mansion, even though this is a contemporary, current day story. And he's in his 80s, and his house, he's a horrible hoarder, and the house is full top to bottom with trash and junk and some really weird things, especially if you get past the wall of National Geographics that he has forbidden anyone to pass. But of course Maud does. She doesn't go there often enough, though. I wanted to see more of that stuff because he's got some pretty weird collections when you get past the stairs. She is trying to help Mr. Flood, try to just clear out some junk, get him to take a bath, find out why he hates his son. And her best friend, Renata, who lives in her apartment and is an agoraphobic retired magician's assistant, Renata smells a mystery, and she has all these theories about what has happened at Mr. Flood's house and things that he might have done. And the 2 of them are very, very amateur detectives, and they make a lot of mistakes and misjudgments of people in this story. The language is fabulous. The dark humor is just absolutely just jewels in every other sentence. And the story is it's dark, but it rollicks along. I would say my only quibble with it as far as identifying a weakness would be some of the characters could have stood more development. Maud and Renata are fantastic, and I realized that I said that word too many times in my last video, so I'm going to try not to say that word any more times. I will give it to Maud and Renata, though. They are fantastic. The supporting characters, I would have liked more, especially Mr. Flood, because that was a weird dude. And I would have liked to know more or hear more from him because his scenes are really priceless. And also the ending, it's sort of, a lot of things sort of came together really fast, sort of abrupt. And even though I talked in a recent video about how I am on board with unsettled endings, that's not the same thing as loose threads that should have been explained, where you're left with a bunch of, well, wait a minute, what about the such and such, or well, was he the this or that, or why was that? So there was some of those in here. I don't know if she did it on purpose or if she didn't do it and I have sort of missed something at the end of the book. There were some threads that I was just a little bit unsatisfied about, but overall I really did love the book. I will say I thought that Night Ship is a better book. It was just more there was in that book there were two time periods and she balanced them so well and developed them so well. She also had to do a bunch of research because there was something that actually did happen in history in another century in that book. And I don't know, just all together I felt it was a more accomplished novel. The characters were developed more subtly and the supporting characters had more going on with them as well. And I don't want to say too much because it would give some things away, but there were a few themes that carried from it between the two books, and I thought that they were just better rendered in the Night Ship. But I really did love this book anyway. I don't want to undercut it. I think that it is. I do recommend it. So it was a very good read. Then the next book that I moved on to was a reread, and I talked a little bit about this, I guess, in my May TBR, and I talked about my plan to reread Station 11, The Glass Hotel, and Sea of Tranquility close together, like in the next couple of months. And I did read Station 11, and that prompted me for today's shirt choice. The book was better. So let me talk about that for a second. Fortunately for me and Stephen, my viewing companion, by the way, here's a picture of Stephen photobombing me when I was trying to get started on this video. That's just how he is. We both read Station 11 when it was fairly new. It came out, it was published in 2014. We read it in maybe 2014 or 2015. I don't know if we read it immediately when it came out, but it was fresh and we both loved it. And then we read the next ones when they came out. And we did watch the HBO version of Station 11, I guess a few months ago, and we enjoyed it. We were aware that there were differences, but it had been far enough away from having read it that they didn't bother us too much. And so I did not suffer a huge recurrence of my chronic condition, comparatitis. I will confess right now that I am the absolute worst person to watch any movie or show with when I have read the book, because I don't even like being with myself too much usually during that, because my comparatitis is severe. I just have urges to stop the movie and look things up, and I just cannot let it rest. Even when I try to just stop and relax and say, this is a different experience than that book, and it's okay. I mean, I know that, but you know, the force is strong in this one. So anyway, luckily there had been a long period of time, so I was able to watch and enjoy that show. But then I had like a retroactive case of comparatitis when I reread Station 11, because I'm sorry, but yeah, the book is better. And it just is. The rereading of this, I think it was better the second time than it was the first time. It sounds really corny, but I think I feel that way because of the pandemic in between. Now, in case you are not familiar with Station 11, because I know not everybody has read this book, it is about mainly a group of survivors in the years following an enormous flu-like pandemic. It was called the Georgia flu, and it hit so hard and so fast that 99% of the Earth's population, it is estimated, died. If you got the Georgia flu, it was very contagious and you died within 48 hours. So it spread like wildfire and greatly exacerbated by air travel. The very beginnings of it were especially eerie to read about, when people had kind of heard about this flu, but it was somewhere else. And it was probably being hyped up by the media, and then all of a sudden it was there. Of course, when she wrote this book, she did not know that COVID-19 was coming. and she's had to answer a million interview questions about it since. Every time in this book when people reflect on what has been lost, the people they lost, the things they remember, the tiny things, the conveniences of life, just everything large and small. The fact that she was able to encapsulate that the way she did, and it just hits different reading it now. It's more emotional and more realistic. I'm going to include a clip of her reading a few passages. She was reading this at an event when she was a finalist for the National Book Award. Did she win it? I have to go back and check. I'll put it in if she did. But she's reading a couple of pieces, including a famous passage from chapter 6, which in the book is very short, and it's just a chapter called An Incomplete List. And it's just a list of all the things that no longer exist in the post-pandemic world. So what we have basically is at the very, very beginning of the book, there are some people doing a performance of King Lear, including a famous film actor who's playing Lear. And in the audience is a man named Jivan who's studying to be a paramedic, but he used to be a paparazzi. And there's a child actor named Kirsten. This production is using a trio of little girls to portray Lear's daughters as kind of a little chorus. And Kirsten has struck up a friendship with Arthur, this middle-aged actor. He's been kind to her during this production, and she's very inspired. She wants to be an actor. And I'm not really giving anything away because this is the first couple pages, but Arthur suffers a heart attack in performance. Jivan runs up onto the stage to try to save him. And in the aftermath, everybody filters out of the theater. And this is the framework of the very beginning of the pandemic, because on his way home, Jivan receives a series of calls from a friend of his that works in an emergency room who progressively is telling him how it's getting worse and worse, and hundreds of people are coming in and they're dying right and left, and you need to get out of the city. So that is happening, and then we have forwards at different points in time, 1 year after, 5 years after. We go around to a few different people. There's a friend of Arthur's, there's one of his ex-wives, and there's Kirsten in the future when she has joined a traveling symphony of players. There's a symphony and a theater company that puts on Shakespeare productions, and they travel in a circuit through the little towns and areas of survivors. This is all taking place outside of Toronto. In the show, it was moved to Chicago. I'm talking probably too much about this. Let me say a couple more things. So anyway, so Kirsten is a Shakespearean actor in the future. And there's just so many beautiful passages in this book. It's hard to explain what all it's about, but things, if you read any of her books, you know that things interweave and connect together. And sometimes people don't even know what the connections are, but we see them as a reader, the future and the past. And there is both beautiful, just descriptive passages, emotional passages, but also there's action. There is plot and action in here as well. I'm kind of making it sound like it's a big meditation, and I do not read those kind of books. There is actually a plot and things tie together, and at the heart of it is a graphic novel called Station 11 that was written by one of Arthur's ex-wives. She gave him a copy, he gave it to Kirsten, and she has carried it with her through all these years. And so passages from Station 11 come into the story. And the motto of the Traveling Symphony is, "Because survival is insufficient," which is a line from a Star Trek show. But it kind of at the heart of this book, part of it is the necessity of art and beauty to human beings, even when everything else is gone. So that is one of the themes as well. Anyway, I love this book. I loved it again. If you've never read it, I highly recommend it. If you read it back when it was newer and you have not read it, thank goodness I didn't read this in 2020. This would have just slayed me to death. But wait, that was an oxymoron. Never mind. Anyway, read it again. Read it. Tell me if it also hits you differently the second time around. Loved it. I'm also reading How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. I keep wanting to say Clint Black, but that is a country singer. I've never listened to his music. I don't even know what he looks like, but somehow his name keeps popping up, and all I can say is it's some sort of fallout from living in Texas. But the author's name is Clint Smith, and he's also a poet. But this is a nonfiction book in which Clint Smith has visited several important locations in American history that have to do with the history and legacy of slavery. The subtitle is A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America. I read the first two sections this week, which were about his visit to Monticello in Virginia, which was Thomas Jefferson's home. And then also he went to the Whitney Plantation in Louisiana. Now, I have been to Monticello. I lived in Virginia for several years. And so I did visit probably in the late 80s, the Monticello. And it was very interesting because he visits there and he takes the tours. And today there are several different tours you can take of this historic plantation. You can take the traditional house tour, or you can take the slavery tour where you learn more about that history. And you can take the very specific Sally Hemings tour that deals with the history and legacy of Thomas Jefferson's relationship with his slave, Sally Hemings, with whom he had several children. Now, when I went to this tour back in the 80s, it was just that traditional house tour. And the tour basically mirrors the description of Monticello in this old textbook. Fortunately, I have this 1980s high school history textbook that I failed to return after 10th or 11th grade social studies class. So now I can look and see what was I taught about these topics. I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations has run out and they cannot come and reclaim my high school diploma at this point. And even if they did, I don't care because I'm retired. So here's what they say about Monticello in this 1980s rendition. We have there's a picture, lovely building, and it says, Thomas Jefferson was the most versatile of all American presidents. Among other accomplishments, he designed and built his home in Monticello and filled it with ingenious gadgets and furniture of his own invention. That is how I remember that tour. The house is lovely, and we hear about how he designed everything. Little to no mention of the slaves that were there to do all the work at his plantation and that he owned as possessions. So Clint Smith talks to people involved in the updating of these tours, the experience of the visitors that come through and their attitudes and the things that they knew and didn't know based on their own experiences and education. It's very, very interesting. And I'm learning something in each section. I'll talk more about it as I go along. That brings us to the book that I started last night, which is Scatterlings by Resoketswe Manenzhe. And this is a South African author. This is her first novel. She has published some poetry and short stories in periodicals, I think, and anthologies. Yeah, first novel. This was a book that our daughter gave us for Christmas. Stephen read it a couple months ago. He liked it. He said he liked it but didn't love it. It was good but not great. And so now I'm giving it a try. And this book takes place in 1927. South Africa passes the Immorality Act, which prohibits sexual intercourse between Europeans or white people and natives, black people. And it is about a couple, a married couple, Alyssa and Abram. She is black. She's Jamaican. He is South African and white, and they have two daughters. And I've only read the beginning of it, but Alyssa is not mentally well, and the news that this act was passed triggers some panic and desperate behavior. And that's all that's happened so far, so I don't want to give anything away. But that's what's happening at the beginning of the story. But Stephen, she does write a lot in journals, and Stephen says that that becomes a large part of the story is what she has written in her journals. So I am looking forward to getting further into that, and I'll let you know how I feel about it when I have read the rest of it. All right, so that's it for this week. That's what I read. That's what I watched. How about you? Have you had some interesting reading experiences this week, or have you read these books? If you have read and watched Station 11, you can tell me what you think. Yeah, what have you been doing? Let me know. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will be back on Tuesday. I've been tagged in a video, and I need to work on that one, and that's what I'm planning for Tuesday. So I'll see you then. Bye-bye.